All right. Welcome to our webinar on the 4-H National Youth Science Day Challenge. This year it is Game Changers, and computer science can be a real game changer for young people when it empowers them to become creators with technology, not just consumers of technology. And that's what we're going to focus on today, is strategies that you can use to help foster computational thinking and support youth in thinking of themselves as someone who does computer science, and using the National 4-H Youth Science Day Challenge as a tool to do that, to develop STEM identity and to enable active learning in computer science through your 4-H or your after-school program. National Youth Science Day is a resource that engages young people ages 8 through 14 in computer science, and it is a tool that you can purchase the kit, and there's a link here to purchase the kits. I think they're about $21, or you can download the instructions for free from the National Youth Science Day website. And there are also 13 years worth of National Youth Science Day challenges that you can download from this site as well. So you don't just have to focus on this year's challenge, Game Changers. The purpose of our webinar today is to help staff develop their competence in leading the National Youth Science Day Challenge in a way that really engages learners, develops their identity as a computer scientist and a computational thinker, and can empower them as they grow with new skills and resources that bring them opportunities in the future. Game Changers is written so that you don't have to be an expert. You don't have to know anything about computer science or technology to lead this activity. There's a lot of instructions, step-by-step guides, there's videos that do a lot of the instructing, so you don't have to be teaching the children how to code, but that you can learn it alongside them. And you can bring this activity to learners anywhere. There are offline activities that you can do with just a few supplies. There's online experiences that youth can have, and there's also a downloadable version of the Scratch programming environment so that you can use it on computers that don't have an internet connection. So it's really flexible and provides lots of opportunities to bring computer science out in different ways. I want to start today with a couple of introductions, and then we'll get right into the meat of our webinar. This webinar is being recorded, so if you want to share it with colleagues or come back to it to view again, you can do that at the Click to Science website. My name is Sandra Frericks. I am a science education specialist with Nebraska 4-H and part of the Click to Science team. I do a lot of our professional development, and a lot of the names coming across the participant box are familiar. So I welcome those of you who have been here before, and also welcome you those that this is your first Click to Science webinar. We do a webinar about once a month and try to focus it on resources you can use in out-of-school science, STEM programming, and also tools for professional development if you're training others, after-school staff, volunteers, 4-H leaders, whoever it is that you're working with. We try to bring these opportunities to you. I do encourage you to use the chat box to interact with me and with each other during the webinar today. And I encourage you to share your questions and your ideas in there. There'll be time. Excuse me. I'm afraid I have a sneeze coming on. There'll be times when I'll ask you to join in the chat box. There's a question about future webinars. I will share that with you at the end of the webinar. You can go to the Click to Science page to find out more about that at clicktosciencepd.org. All right, I told you a little bit about myself, and now I want to learn a little bit about you. So I'm going to share a poll here and give you just a minute to respond. Are you familiar with the 4-H National Youth Science Day Challenge? Have you used any of these resources before? That'll help me kind of know where to target our discussion today. We've got about half the group that's voted, so I'll give you just another few seconds to vote, and then I will broadcast the results. All right, it looks like we have a few people who are familiar with National Youth Science Day, but a lot of us are not. So I will try to keep that in mind as we're going through the webinar today. About half the audience isn't really familiar with National Youth Science Day or hasn't used the resources in the past. I do want to point out that there are a lot of National Youth Science Day challenges available. So if you haven't checked out the website, National Youth Science Day, do that because they're all free and they're great short curriculum pieces that you can use in a lot of different settings. All right, I have one more poll to ask you about. And this is about what your role is. If you could give me a minute to tell me about that. The first thing I noticed is we have a few people who said none of these describe me. So I would love to have you share in the chat box what your role is. We do have a lot of different people who use Click to Science resources, museum educators, other informal science educators, as well as volunteers and professionals who work in out-of-school youth programs. So looks like our audience today is mostly 4-H, which makes sense. We've had a lot of messages going out by our 4-H partners about this webinar. So once again, thank you for joining us, and thank you for taking time to introduce yourself a little bit to me so I can make sure that this webinar is going to be useful for you. Since we do have so many 4-Hers, one of the things that I want to emphasize is that we're going to really focus on how to help young people develop to their fullest potential. So you'll see a lot of positive youth development in the approaches that we take at Click to Science, and I think that'll seem familiar to you. We have some STEM fellows here. That's maybe some of our other people. And library, great. Thank you for introducing yourselves. Okay, computational thinking. That's one of the words that I used in the introduction. We want to help you see themselves as computational thinking, as problem solvers that use computers and computation to solve problems in a systematic way. Now, before I started working with the computer science initiative in 4-H last year, I didn't really know what computational thinking was. It seemed like I should. It seemed like a term that made sense to me, but I didn't know exactly what it meant. And I was a little surprised to find out that it was something that I was already doing, even though I didn't have a word for it. Computational thinking describes the skills and approaches that computer scientists use to solve complex problems. Now, I'm not a computer scientist and my problems are not really that complex, but I still use a lot of the same systematic thinking as problem-solving strategies in my real life, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. So, essentially, computational thinking is problem-solving, and it's designed to develop computer-based solutions. So that's kind of makes sense, but I'm sure it's not quite enough information yet. So I have a video that I want to share with you that I hope will help make this clear. This video is from code.org, and I will share the link to it in the chat box. It comes from some of their offline computer science activities that focus on computational thinking. So let me get this started. Oh.
The lesson on computational thinking is intended to teach you how to take a big, difficult problem and break it down into several simpler problems. The goal of this lesson is to write a set of instructions that someone can follow to draw one of the monsters included in this lesson plan. Students will break into groups to write instructions, and then they'll switch them with another group that will have to draw the monster. Groups will write instructions using the 4 steps of computational thinking: decomposition, pattern location, abstraction, and algorithms. First, groups will decompose the task, which means make a game plan. Then, they'll look for patterns between all the monsters in the catalog. When they come across differences between the monsters, they'll abstract out or remove those details. For instance, one monster in the catalog has Vegetas eyes, and another has Spritum eyes. But they both have eyes, so we can write a line that says, this monster has blank eyes. So students will be able to write a set of instructions, called an algorithm, that lists the monster's parts with blanks for what the style should be. This is the set of instructions they'll pass to other students to recreate their very own monster.
I hope everyone is able to see that video and to hear it pretty well. If not, then I encourage you to use the link in the chat box to go back and view that in a little bit. When you go to that link, you'll find not just the video that we just watched, but a lesson plan to go with it. So you can do that activity that they were talking about in the video. Let me get back to our PowerPoint. So now we're thinking about these terms that they introduced in the video, and kind of like computational thinking, I really see these as terms that seem like I should know exactly what they mean, but they may not mean what I think they mean, right? Decomposition, when I think about that, I really think about my compost pile outside, and that's not exactly what we mean, but it is related. So decomposition, that is taking a problem and breaking it down into smaller parts so that it's a little bit easier to tackle. And that's a skill that my mom taught me whenever I got frustrated. Well, what's the first step you can take toward reaching that bigger solution that you're looking for? Pattern recognition is about observing patterns, trends, and regularities in information. And it's really important in computational thinking because patterns can make it much easier to solve a complex problem. Abstraction is identifying what information is really relevant to the problem you're trying to solve, extracting the relevant information and not worrying about the details that may not be relevant to the actual problem you're working on. And an algorithm is one way of describing your solution. It's an ordered set of instructions. And the goal with an algorithm is that it doesn't solve just one problem, but can solve one type of problem through using some abstraction to make it a broad solution that doesn't necessarily apply in just one particular case. So I said earlier that computational thinking is something that I realize that I'm doing. And one of the things that I like to do is make lists and cross things off my list. And when I do that, I'm using decomposition. I'm thinking about all the things I need to get done and breaking it down into the smaller tasks that I can do that I can manage in a shorter time, and that helps me get to my ultimate goal for the whole week. So making a to-do list is an example of decomposition. And if it's a really complicated project, I'll even take that steps and put them on a calendar, think about what order I need to do, when do I need to get this step done so I can keep up with the next step and put it on a calendar. And when I do that, I'm really creating an algorithm so that I know what order I need to go through these steps in order to solve the problem and finish the project that I'm trying to complete. So I explain this because it's important, I think, for young people to know that computational thinking is something that they're doing and that they can use their computational thinking skills to solve problems in real life, not just in computer science and programming. So I'd love to have you share in the chat box, what are your thoughts about computational thinking in everyday life? What are the things you do that use these skills to help you solve problems, even if they're not problems that are on a computer? I see lots of 4-H type projects in the chat box, following a recipe, using a pattern to create a piece of clothing, color coding a calendar. That's a great idea. So these are all ways that we're using computational thinking to help manage our problems that we face every day. And we want to help bring these skills to young people so that they can do it. They can do the same thing. So as a summary of our introduction here, we've kind of introduced this idea of computational thinking, and this is what we're going to try to accomplish in the webinar today. First, I want you to leave with an understanding of what computational thinking is and to have some strategies that you can use to foster computational thinking and problem solving with the young people that you work with. I also want you to have strategies for actively engaging learners in STEM learning, to have them be the ones who are doing the intellectual work, the active learners in this challenge, and also developing a STEM identity. So we want strategies for active learning and developing a STEM identity. And finally, we hope you'll leave with some ideas about how to make this National Youth Science Day experience fun as well, so that you can really have a great experience with the young people you're working with, or with the teen leaders or adults that you're training to do this. All right, let's get on to those strategies. The first one I want to think about is what is active STEM learning? How can we use active learning in computer science and in Game Changers in particular to make it a better experience? So simply put, active learning is an experience where the kids are doing the work. They're learning, they're solving problems, and they're having fun too. And that's probably our goal most of the time when we're working with young people, to make it an active learning experience. Active doesn't necessarily mean that kids are up and moving around or being loud, but it can. And sometimes those things do make it easier to have active learning. But really, it's about what's happening in their head. Are they solving problems? Are they investigating phenomena in meaningful ways? That's really the heart of what we're trying to capture with active learning. We want them to be doing the thinking and the problem solving. Joseph Krachek, a professor of science education at Michigan State University, talked about how this fits with the next generation national science standards. He said, the next generation of science standards promise to help students understand why it is that we have to know science and help them to use scientific learning to develop critical thinking skills, which can be applied throughout their lives, no matter the topic. And that's really what we're talking about when we talk about active learning, really developing skills and strategies that they can apply in their everyday life that are going to make a difference for them and help them be successful as adults. The second skill that we'll be talking a lot about today is developing a STEM identity. So I want to talk a little bit about exactly what I mean with that. What I'm focusing on here is helping young people see themselves as someone who learns about, uses, and contributes to STEM. And with Game Changers, specifically, we want them to see themselves as a computational thinker. And so that's what the graphic here is about. And this is kind of a progression in how they view themselves. We want them to think of themselves in the end as someone who can solve problems using a computer. And we do that by providing them positive experiences and developing their skills. And then they progress from knowing how to use computational thinking to enjoying using their new skill, to knowing that they can use that skill to solve problems, having some experience solving problems, and finally to seeing and valuing themselves as a computational thinker. When you see themselves as a computational thinker, it becomes part of their identity, part of their STEM identity. And having a STEM identity, seeing yourselves as part of the STEM world, gives young people access to a lot of new opportunities, to STEM-related careers, to fields that they may not have considered until they saw themselves as someone who does science or technology or engineering or all of those things. So we want youth to see themselves as a computational thinker, and as we do that, in a way, we're opening up a world of opportunities for them, for skills and careers that they can't reach unless they have that STEM identity. So how do we do that? What are the things you can do to lead experiences that open up these sorts of opportunities for young people to help them see themselves as computational thinkers? So I'm going to share another video in just a moment. This one is from Click to Science, and in this video, Dagan is working with a group of English language learners to develop their computational thinking skills and STEM identity. He wants to support them in seeing themselves as computational thinkers. So he adds an activity that reinforces the vocabulary that he's using in this lesson and reinforces their sense of identity. So it's kind of dual purpose here to help those English language learners be familiar with the vocabulary that they're using and also see themselves as a computational thinker. The activity that he's doing with them is called a game with no instructions, and that's the same activity that we watched a video about earlier. In this video, I want you to really focus not so much on the activity, but on what Dagan is doing and how he chose to reinforce vocabulary, why he made that choice, and to think about what impact that had for the young people. And I will share this link in just a moment as well.
You're a computational thinker.
You're a computational thinker.
Awesome. To form STEM identity, the youth need to be able to form that opinion of themselves, and they need to internalize it. So how does that happen? So one is awareness. So knowing that these things are out there is definitely helps form identity as a kind of a passive, that thing exists, thus I could pursue it at some time. But to go beyond that, we also have to have some of that identity formed within the students. Once I became a partner with Jay here, I'm going to pick one of those words and I'm going to say decompose, break a problem into smaller pieces. I'm going to say a definition, and then Jay's going to choose one. So just choose any one of those four, and you're going to do it over and over and over. Okay, which one? And what's the definition?
Steps that you can follow to finish a task.
Boom. All right, so we've both said a definition. We're going to say, you are a computational thinker. Say it to me. And then I go find another partner. Right? So then I Today, during this lesson, I happen to have the students orally say, I am, and then whatever that identity is around, and multiple times, in multiple ways, in multiple contexts. So with the success, I wanted them to say, I am the computational thinker. So what do I do first? I need to choose an animal. So this is that algorithm. Okay, so I'm going to choose puppy. Right, what do I do next?
Roll again.
Oh, okay. And then I write it down. I'm figuring out the pattern here. Yeah.
And you gotta go again.
And again, okay.
That's one.
And a two.
Then you got one, so you're gonna put a cell
Thank you.
phone. Then,
Cell phone, okay.
Then you got a two again, so you're gonna put a cell phone, a blue cell phone in his tail.
On the horse's tail, was there an example? Okay, that's what the cell phone needs to look like. Blue cell phone on the puppy's tail. Yeah?
Yeah.
So you just gave me a set of instructions. You remember what that word's called? Algorithm. So you gave me an algorithm to solve this problem, right? To follow these instructions. You guys are great computational thinkers. Can you all look at each other and be like, I'm a computational thinker? Like you're fixing your hair? Yeah. So reinforcement of that helps them internalize that as a way for them to begin to solve problems.
Then a blanket. Then a blanket.
Nailed it.
That means
Yeah.
I need to draw a blank on my blank thing.
You nailed it. You're a computer scientist. Even if they don't become a computer scientist, being able to be a multifaceted person, be able to have multiple skills, this would remain with them, that they become a problem solver. It's a transferable skill, and having them feel that inside them by saying it, I think is super powerful.
So what did you notice in the video? How did you see what was Dagan doing to reinforce identity and to help build skills at the same time? Share some ideas in the chat box about what you observed. So in this video, we've got a really good example of how you can foster active learning where the youth are doing the thinking and the problem solving and identity development at the same time through the reinforcement, the positive feedback he was giving. He was keeping them engaged and active as learners. He's also giving them lots of opportunities to practice that vocabulary so that they could become familiar with it and to apply the skills. This is a great example. Dagon's a really skilled facilitator, but the idea is you can do this too. You can really engage learners in seeing themselves as someone who does computational thinking, someone who solves problems. What are some strategies that you would take back from this activity, things that you would try? We had a lot of comments about the positive feedback that he was giving youth, the way he develops relationships, and we know that's really important with young people. What else could you take back to use as you're facilitating the Game Changers activities? I'll give you just a minute to finish gathering your thoughts and sharing in the chat box and looking at what other people have shared. One of the things that I really like to do with computer science is try to turn the tables, and sometimes it's easier for me to do it with computer science, to not be the one who has all the answers and to get answers from the learners. I'm not confident in my computer science and my programming skills, so it's a lot easier for me to step back and not be the expert. So I think this is a great opportunity to be that guide on the side with young people, supporting them, cheerleading for them, but letting them take charge. And that's one of the advantages, I think, with computer science, that we can do that. Oh, I just noticed chat comment that we are not sharing with all attendees. I think that's probably my fault too. So try to make sure you check that on there, that you're sharing with all attendees. Thank you for mentioning that, Terry. Okay, let's move on to learn a little bit more about the Game Changers Challenge and how you can use this to support computational thinking. As I said, free, that's always important. Really designed for 8 to 14-year-olds to develop their skills and their confidence in coding and computational thinking. The Game Changers Challenge was designed by Google and West Virginia Extension Service and is really ideal for after-school programs, 4-H programs, and other informal STEM learning programs. With Game Changers, youth use computer science to engage their passions, create games, and solve problems. Game Changers doesn't just use computers to teach computational thinking, it uses physical activity, puzzles, movement, to teach computational thinking practices, and it makes real-world connections between computer science, civic engagement, healthy living, and agriculture. So it really brings a lot of different resources into your program. You can find all of the resources for Game Changers at the 4-H National Youth Science Day website. And it is an excellent resource to find the curriculum and the supporting pieces, to order kits, all of those things that you need to do. So in Game Changers, there's 3 activities. Pick Your Passion is an online coding activity designed by CS First. It uses Scratch and to code with, and youth will use Scratch to tell a story that they're passionate about. You can go even deeper into this activity and create public service announcements as a call for action that helps youth ignite their passion, especially with middle school students. This idea of creating a message about a cause that they're passionate about, I think you'll find it's very powerful. So that's Picture Your Passion. It can be a simple story about finding a kitten on the street, or it can be an important story about suicide prevention or listening to your peers. Pitch your passion. Yes, I think that's right. Pitch your passion. That is an error on my slides. Sorry about that. The second one is Hack Your Harvest. Oh, back to Pitch Your Passion. In the kit, there is a USB drive, so you can download everything onto a computer that has a USB port so that you don't have to have it connected to the internet as you're leading this activity. It takes a little bit of time ahead of time, but it can make it a lot easier to manage the activity and not have to worry about having a bunch of computers connected. Second activity is Hack Your Harvest, and this is what we call an unplugged activity. It's a computer science activity that doesn't have any computers involved. In the kit, you'll find there's some boards. It's a board game where youth program their tractor to take the most efficient path from the barn to from the field to the barn. They have challenges like avoiding obstacles or harvesting crops that they want to do on the way to the barn that make it more challenging. And it really helps you go through the process of using computational thinking to solve this challenge. And the last activity is Program Your Playground. And it is another unplugged activity where youth experience the software design process as they create and test their own game. They can use everyday objects and make up their own rules to create a playground game that others can play. And then they use abstraction and user testing to improve their game. So that's kind of an overview of what is in your kit. And you can see in the picture here the supplies that come with that kit. Are there any questions about the National Youth Science Day kit and what you're going to find inside of it? The kits, I think, are $21, and they have supplies for a group of 10 in it. So if you have more than 10 youth, you have a couple of options. You can use the USB drive to print out some extra copies of resources so that you can have more kids involved, or you can order more than one kit. Right now, there is a buy two, get one free. So if you have 30 kids in your program, you might as well just go and buy 3 kits for the cost of 2 and then have all the resources that you need. Jeremy's doing a great job keeping those links in the chat box for us. Thank you for doing that. All right, applying your skills. So what you want to think about with this Game Changers Challenge is that there's a lot of flexibility. You can spend just 30 minutes with the first part of Pitch Your Passion, give them a little bit of time to figure it out and create their first image, And you've introduced programming and coding and this first opportunity to have fun doing computer science. So that's one way to start. Or you can spend 2 hours and really give them time to go into the picture passion, maybe even have some time in between if they want to do a little research onto the public service message that they're creating. So that can take a lot more time. Or you can do all the activities, maybe spend about 4 hours spread out over a week or even a quarter working on these. So there's a lot of options, and for each activity there's links to other resources in the kit as well. So you can make it be as short or as long as you need it to be. We're going to focus in the webinar today on Hack Your Harvest. There is another webinar that focuses on Pitch Your Passion, so we're not going to talk as much about that, but we're going to focus just on Hack Your Harvest. And in the kit for that activity, you will find supplies for 5 small groups. So youth will be working with a partner. So you've got 5 game boards and tractor pieces for the partners to use. You've got cling stickers that peel and can be moved around to go with those game boards, dry erase markers. You've got youth workbooks for all 10 of the young people in the group. You might want to bring some pencils also. Those aren't in the kit, but otherwise everything you're going to need for Hack Your Harvest is already in that kit. If you have more than 10 kids, you can use that USB drive to print out more game boards for the activity. Now, we're on page 27 of the Facilitator's Guide. If you want to follow along here, that's not what you see on the screen, but we're going to start on page 27. And this, on page 27, you see tips for introducing the activity and introducing the vocabulary that we're going to use. Hack Your Harvest introduces youth to the concepts of automation and efficiency and teaches the basic principles for programming. Writing instructions, programming, meaning writing instructions for computers to follow. And I encourage you to use this vocabulary, programming, automation, efficiency, as you're facilitating the activity, and reinforce it, repeat it again and again as you saw in the last video, so that you can really build their interest and engagement. And in the Facilitator's Guide, there is a link to a video that you can use to help build their interest in this activity and give them a little bit of background knowledge. So let's look at that video real quick. This video comes from Wired magazine, and it introduces how automation helps with farming.
This is the old way of harvesting lettuce. It's tedious and unbelievably backbreaking. And this is the new way. Meet the automatic lettuce harvester. Hear that? That's the sound of water knives, ultra-high pressure blasts that cut through the plant, which is then escorted up to workers who trim and sort it.
You're using less effort because you don't cut, you don't bend over. It's really much easier.
More and more, the machines are assuming control over our food production. After all, humanity has to feed its ballooning population using the same amount of land. Here in the Salinas Valley, about an hour and a half south of San Francisco, farmers and tech types are joining forces to turn this place into a kind of Silicon Valley for agriculture. Their quest is to make farming more productive and more efficient, not just for the Salinas Valley, but for the world. That means more automation and even a special variety of lettuce that's easier for the machines to cut.
So essentially what we're doing is we're changing agriculture to meet the labor need on the harvest side.
Yeah, so about that labor. This machine requires half of the workers you'd need to harvest the old-fashioned way, which means somebody's going to lose their job, right? Not in California. It's got itself a labor shortage.
Here in California, we've got an aging workforce. We're not getting that younger population into the job.
Not only that, but the number of immigrant workers has plummeted. While automation will no doubt put people out of work in other industries, for California's farmers at least, it may be the only way they can make it in a changing economy.
Planning ahead for the future, it's important that we're ready to have fewer workers.
So for now, the answer in Salinas is more robots. In the Taylor Farms processing plant, it's the machines that do the heavy lifting. This gadget does quality control, automatically detecting crummy lettuce and blasting it out of the system with a jet of air. A robot even does the packaging, far quicker than a human could ever manage. Okay, so they're not perfect, but all in all, from picking to boxing, a human hardly ever touches the product. That's good for both food safety and efficiency.
We still need people. I think we're always moving down that automation track. I don't know if you get to full automation. There's a science around agriculture, but there's a bit of an art to it as well. But I think in terms of getting rid of the hardest part of the jobs, I see that continuing.
And over in downtown Salinas, the Western Grower Center for Innovation and Technology nurtures startups that increasingly mechanize and digitize agriculture.
So that's included in your activity as a introduction to this idea of automation, and it gives them challenges that they can use as their just a framework for understanding the activity you're going to do. But I had a question after watching this video. I loved it. I'm not sure all the kids that I would work with would love it. So what was your thought on the video? Are they hooked after watching this video? Is there something more you would have to do to get the youth that you work with engaged in this activity, to get them excited about it? Share your responses in the chat box, please. What do you think? Is this enough to get them excited, or do we need to do something else? Give you a minute to think on that. So do we have any food and nutrition people or ag experts in the group here? How do we get them excited about this? How do we have them see how automation makes a difference? Any ideas? There may be some research going on at your own university that you could share with kids. Maybe you could find a video that's a little more engaging than this one from Wired Magazine, which really wasn't designed for kids. You don't have to show the video at all. You can just go into the activity too and focus on the game part of it as much as anything else. Maybe have them have the opportunity to see a combine or other piece of equipment and see how automation works. That would be really cool, I think, for a lot of kids. So it's important as you're thinking through this activity to think about, what are you going to do to get them excited about it? If you don't get them hooked in at the beginning, it's a lot harder to make the activity fun and meaningful for them. So thinking about your own context, what resources you have available, what you can bring to that experience is going to be really important about how you can engage the young people. And thinking about particularly the audience you're working with, and is this going to be meaningful to them, and does it connect to what's happening in their community? All right, so now we've introduced the game, we've introduced the activity, and now we want to make sure that we are focusing on active learning. And one of the ways that we can do that is with teen leaders. And I know a lot of people are using teen leaders to with their National Youth Science Day because it is easy to implement curriculum and they can get a lot out of it. So it's a great opportunity, and teen leaders are often very confident with technology, and this is an opportunity for them to step up and be near peer role models for younger students. But it's important to remember that it's not fair to just put them in front of a group of 8 to 10-year-olds without any prep. Just looking at the vocabulary here in the Hack Your Harvest activity, there's a lot going on there, and it's important that you take the time to work with teen leaders to help them prepare and to get them confident that they're ready to go with this activity, that they have the skills to support computational thinking and active learning, that they understand that it's not helpful to do the learning for the students. It's okay to let them struggle a little bit. So we're ready to start. We've got the activity going. Now, how are we going to get all of the supplies out? That's the next big challenge. And it's an opportunity for you to empower your learners again by letting them do it for themselves. Active learning is about letting the learners do the thinking and the problem solving and not taking that challenge away from them. So one way you can do that is by how you distribute supplies. Having everything that a group of partners need in a bag or basket, they can come and pick up what they need and go find a space to work, is one way to do that. Setting everything up like a buffet and having one person from each group, or even having both sets of partners come up together and select the supplies they're going to need, is another way you can do it. Think about the space that you have and how you can get the activity started quickly so that everyone is doing, not just sitting and waiting for a long time for everything to get passed out and ready to begin. Let me go back. The instructions for the activity right here are also in the youth guide. So once you have the supplies in their hands and they have their youth guide, they can get started doing this on their own. They don't need a lot of whole group instruction to get into this activity. You can turn them loose and then walk around the room making sure everybody's busy, but not having to spend all your time instructing. Then, now we're on page 30 of the facilitator's guide, and it's time to talk. And this is one of my key points. I think it's crucial that we don't skip the opportunity to reflect and process this activity. But we don't want it to drag either. We want to keep it active, keep things moving. Because at this point, your kids have done an activity, but they probably haven't learned anything yet. And the discussion that you're going to have is going to help them put the pieces together and turn the doing into learning. So here are some important points to consider as you're having your discussion after the first part of the activity. You want to emphasize that there's more than one way to solve a problem. That's an important tenet of computer science, that there isn't a single way to achieve a goal. So having different pathways and different ways to solve the problem is good. There's not a single right answer. And you also don't have to use your first idea. If your first idea doesn't work, you can try again. You can improve it. You can make it work. And these two concepts go together and they help support developing a STEM identity because they focus on the problem-solving part of the process. Oops. Now on page 33, the activity gets more complicated in part 2. There's more of a challenge, and there's obstacles to be avoided. And this is where we're focusing on that identity development and the emerging sense that I can do this. They can see it get more complicated, they can still be successful. So again, in this stage, keep it active, keep things moving, focus on effort. If your program doesn't work, try again. Encourage groups to work at their own pace. Some are going to get through all the puzzles, some will not, and make it okay to not have accomplished each and every puzzle so that learners have a chance to learn at their own pace, not having to keep up with the rest of the group. But do take time to bring everyone back together to discuss what they've learned and keep the activity moving. The next part introduces the traveling salesman problem. Hack Your Harvest is really an exploration of this classic challenge called the traveling salesman. Traveling salesman is not a new problem. In fact, I found a lot of references to it in computer science as I started researching. I couldn't figure out exactly where the problem originated, but the earliest reference I found to it was from 1832. So it's a problem that's been around for a while. And it's a challenge. Again, there's not a single right answer, but it gives us an opportunity to develop a protocol, an algorithm for solving the problems. And it gives us a chance to use logic and make a real world application, because this traveling salesman problem is really a logistics and shipping problem that every company from Amazon to Walmart is working to find a better solution for. With younger students, or if you have limited time, you might not spend a lot of time on the traveling salesman problem. But if you're working with middle school learners, this is an opportunity to help them see themselves as computational thinkers that can solve real-world problems and to feel connected with other computer scientists who are interested in finding the most efficient pathway through the traveling salesman problem. All right, now we are getting to page 37, and I realize our time is up. I am going to finish in about 8 minutes, so if you need to leave, you feel free to come back and view the recording. We're not quite done, but we will be soon. On page 37, you have an opportunity to let youth apply what they've learned by creating their own challenge. Those stickers that they're using on the game board are removable. They can pick them up and move them around so they can create their own puzzle and develop a solution for it. So again, you've got partners so they can create puzzles for each other. And this is a part of the activity that reinforces learning, helps them really own what they've learned, but it also is a part that you can skip if you're running out of time. Do you have any creative ways to remind learners of what this activity is all about? How do we wrap up the activity as we've gotten to the end? How do you not get caught in the trap of spending all your time doing the activity and not having enough time at the end to wrap it up? I'll give you a moment to share your strategies in the chat box. This is kind of a universal challenge, but how is it that we manage time to keep us on track? I see somebody has just joined us, and I apologize. It is a different time this week than our normal Wednesday webinar, so I encourage you, if you didn't hear the first part of the webinar, to join, to go back and look at the recording. Here are the key takeaways. Ooh, a timer. That's a good way to keep everybody on track. Knowing how much time you want to allocate for each part. And then being flexible, like now when I'm going over our time a little bit, but we're going to still take a moment to reinforce these key takeaways that I want you to get out of today's webinar. First, computer science and computational thinking open up new opportunities for young people. We're really expanding their view of the world, and that's crucial. We're giving them access to career pathways that they might not have access to without these resources. You can support developing computational thinking, active learning, and STEM identity in the way that you lead the experience. It's not the curriculum in and of itself that brings these elements out. It's really how you decide to facilitate it. So take time to think about how you're going to achieve these goals. And remember that learning results from processing and applying what they've learned, not just from doing the activity. So it's really important to take time to process the experience, to think about how it connects, to think about what we've learned and how you can apply it. Our recording of the webinar is going to be available at click2sciencepd.org, and I shared the link in the chat box. I'll also share with the recording links to the videos that we shared during the webinar today, and where you can order your National Youth Science Day kits. And again, now is a good time to order those with the buy two, get one free special going on right now for a limited time. I'm going to stop the recording now, and if you have any questions, I encourage you to, you can turn your audio on or you can just type them in the chat box. But thank you all for joining us.